The gunshot echoed through the warehouse like a final prayer, and Vincent Caruso's body hit the concrete before the sound faded. Lorenzo Greco didn't flinch. He never did. The smoking Beretta felt lighter than the gold watch on his wrist as he stepped over the corpse, his Italian leather shoes avoiding the spreading crimson pool with practiced precision. "Clean this up," Lorenzo said, his voice carrying the kind of authority that made grown men move without question. "And send his wife flowers. White roses. Tell her he died thinking of her." The lie tasted like expensive whiskey, smooth, familiar, necessary. Vincent had been begging for his children when the trigger was pulled. But Lorenzo Greco dealt in power, not sentimentality. Traitors didn't get mercy in his world. They got bullets and anonymous graves. The night air hit him as he exited into the Chicago Industrial District, November wind cutting through the darkness like cold truth. 3 SUVs waited, engines purring, his security detail alert and armed. This was his kingdom, built on blood, maintained by fear, decorated with money that most people couldn't count in a lifetime. Lorenzo slid into the back of the middle vehicle, already pulling out his phone. 12 missed calls. 8 from women whose names he'd forget by morning. 3 from his underboss Marco, 1 from his mother in Sicily, still pretending her son wasn't the devil she'd raised. He ignored them all. "Velvet Room," he instructed his driver, referring to the exclusive club he owned in downtown Chicago, where the city's elite came to sin in expensive shadows. The leather seat embraced him as they drove through streets that bent to his will. Lorenzo caught his reflection in the tinted window. Sharp jawline, dark eyes that held secrets enough to bury governments, hair styled with the carelessness that only came from natural perfection. At 34, he'd built an empire that made legitimate businessmen jealous and law enforcement desperate. Women threw themselves at him like prayers to a dark god, senators' daughters, supermodels, heiresses hungry for danger wrapped in Armani suits. He took them, enjoyed them, forgot them. Love was a fairy tale for people who couldn't afford reality. His phone buzzed. A text from Angelina, last week's distraction. "Missing you, baby. Come over." He deleted it without responding. The velvet room pulsed with bass that could be felt in bones, red lights painting everything in shades of desire and regret. Lorenzo entered through the private entrance, and the atmosphere shifted immediately. Eyes turned, whispers spread. The apex predator had arrived, and the prey knew it. "Mr. Greco." His club manager rushed over, nervous energy radiating. "Your table is ready. Champagne is—" "Not tonight, Marcus." Lorenzo's gaze swept the VIP section, cataloging faces, threats, opportunities. Then something stopped him cold. A woman sat alone at the corner table, and she wasn't looking at him. That never happened. She had dark hair that fell in waves over bare shoulders, a black dress that suggested rather than revealed, and a face that belonged on Renaissance paintings, classical beauty with modern edge. But it wasn't her appearance that hooked him. It was the absolute indifference in her posture, the way she studied her wine glass like it held more interest than the most powerful man in the room. Lorenzo moved toward her before his brain caught up with his instincts. "This section is private," he said, standing over her table, expecting the usual reaction. Nervous excitement, calculated seduction, fearful recognition. She looked up slowly, and her eyes were storm gray, holding something he couldn't immediately identify. Not attraction. Not fear. Something darker, deeper, dangerous. "Then you should have better security." Her voice carried an accent he couldn't place, smooth and sharp simultaneously. "I walked right in." A smile tugged at Lorenzo's mouth despite himself. Bold. Stupid but bold. "Do you know who I am?" "Should I?" She took a sip of wine, completely unmoved. "Let me guess. Rich, entitled, probably dangerous, used to getting everything you want." "You're not wrong." He sat down without invitation, intrigued now. "Except the probably part." "There's no probably about it." She studied him like an artist studying a subject she planned to destroy. "You have blood on your cuff." Lorenzo glanced down. A tiny spatter on white fabric, invisible to anyone not looking closely. Vincent's last contribution to the world. He met her eyes again, and something electric passed between them, recognition of darkness in another soul. Occupational hazard, he said smoothly. What occupation requires blood? The kind that pays for clubs like this. He signaled for champagne, his attention fixed on her completely now. Women usually crumbled or threw themselves at him by this point. She did neither. What's your name? Does it matter? Everything matters when I want it to. Sophia. She said it like a challenge. Sophia Ricci. Italian surname. That explained the slight accent underneath American polish. Lorenzo's mind immediately started cataloging, connecting, searching for Ricci's in his world. There were dozens. The name meant nothing, yet meant everything. You come here often, Sophia Ricci? First time. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. Thought I'd see what all the darkness was about. They talked, or rather they sparred verbally for 20 minutes that felt like 20 seconds. She was intelligent, sharp-witted, unimpressed by wealth or power. Every woman he'd ever known wanted something from him. Sophia seemed to want him gone. It was intoxicating. When she stood to leave, Lorenzo found himself standing too, something unfamiliar stirring in his chest. Not desire. That was constant, controllable. This was different. Curiosity mixed with something that felt dangerously like interest. Let me take you home, he offered. I'd rather walk through fire. But there was heat in her eyes that contradicted the words. She moved past him, leaving behind perfume that smelled like jasmine and secrets. Lorenzo watched her weave through the crowd, his instincts humming warnings he couldn't interpret. Then he saw it. On the floor where she'd been sitting, a photograph lay face down. Lorenzo picked it up, turned it over, and his world tilted slightly on its axis. The photo was old, yellowed at the edges. It showed a man, mid-40s, kind eyes, Italian features, standing outside a restaurant Lorenzo recognized immediately. Next to the man was a young girl, maybe 13, dark hair and gray eyes even then. But it wasn't the girl that made Lorenzo's blood run cold. It was the man, Marco Ricci. The informant he'd personally executed 5 years ago in that very restaurant's back room, following Don Castellano's direct orders. The traitor who'd been about to expose 3 families to the FBI. The problem that Lorenzo had solved with 2 bullets and a shallow grave outside the city. Lorenzo's hand tightened on the photograph as he looked toward the exit where Sophia had disappeared into the Chicago night. Ricci. Sophia Ricci. The daughter he'd never known existed had just walked into his club, sat at his table, looked him in the eyes, and walked away like she owned the world he'd built on her father's corpse. This wasn't coincidence. This was war. And Lorenzo Greco had just fallen for the opening move without even knowing the game had begun. Lorenzo didn't sleep that night. He stood in his penthouse overlooking Lake Michigan, the photograph of Marco Ricci burning a hole in his pocket, while the city lights below flickered like dying stars. The whiskey in his hand had gone warm an hour ago, untouched. Marco Ricci. The name circled his mind like a vulture over carrion. 5 years ago, Don Castellano had summoned him to the private study that smelled of cigars and old blood. "We have a rat," the old man had said, sliding a file across the mahogany desk. "Marco Ricci. He's been feeding information to FBI agent Morrison. Names, locations, shipment routes. 3 families are compromised." Lorenzo had looked at the photographs, a middle-aged man with gentle eyes, too gentle for their world. "You're certain?" "Wiretaps. Bank records. He's been paid $40,000 over 6 months. Castellano's voice had carried the weight of judge and executioner. "This is your test, Lorenzo. Handle it cleanly. No witnesses, no mercy." And Lorenzo had. Because that's what soldiers did. They followed orders, pulled triggers, buried bodies, and didn't ask questions that kept them awake at night. But now those questions were screaming. He pulled out his phone, dialing a number he used only for problems that needed invisible solutions. "It's 4 in the morning, Tony Battaglia answered, his voice thick with sleep and irritation. "I need everything on Marco Ricci, the informant we handled in 2020, family, connections, everything we missed." A pause. "That case is closed, boss. Why?" Because his daughter just walked into my club and I want to know if she's planning to put a bullet in my head or just ruin my life slowly. Lorenzo's voice cut like razors through silk. I want it in 2 hours. He hung up before Tony could respond. The sun was rising over Chicago when the encrypted file arrived. Lorenzo opened it, and with each line he read, the knot in his chest tightened. Marco Ricci, age 46 at time of death. Owner of Ricci's Trattoria, front for money laundering, minor operations. Wife deceased, cancer, 2015. One daughter, Sophia Marie Ricci, age 19 at time of father's death, currently 24. Architecture student, Columbia University, dropped out 2021. No criminal record. Current residence, unknown. Known associates, none flagged. But it was the note at the bottom that made Lorenzo's blood run cold. Additional note. Subject's father was executed based on evidence provided by Don Castellano. Recent investigation suggests intelligence may have been fabricated. Ricci's alleged FBI contact, Agent Morrison, denied any informant relationship under oath during unrelated trial, 2023. Credibility of original evidence now questionable. Lorenzo read it 3 times, each word landing like a fist to the gut. Fabricated evidence, no FBI contact. An innocent man executed. He'd killed an innocent man. No, not just any man, Sophia's father. The realization should have brought guilt, but Lorenzo had buried that emotion so deep that only rage could surface. Rage at being used. Rage at Castellano for the lie. Rage at himself for not questioning orders. And underneath it all, something far more dangerous, the memory of gray eyes that looked at him like he was already dead. Sophia Ricci sat in the bathroom of her cramped studio apartment, staring at the photograph she'd duplicated 100 times. The original was still in Lorenzo Greco's possession now, exactly as planned. Let him know. Let him realize who she was. Let him spend sleepless nights wondering when the knife would come. Her hands trembled slightly as she set the photo down. 5 years of pain compressed into this single moment of satisfaction. She could still see her father's face that last morning, kissing her forehead before heading to the restaurant. I have a meeting tonight, Tesoro. Important business. When I get back, we'll talk about your future. Columbia is waiting for you. But he never came back. The police had found his body 3 days later in a drainage ditch outside the city. 2 bullets in the chest, 1 in the head. Execution style. The detective had been sympathetic but clear. Your father was involved with dangerous people, Miss Ricci. I'm sorry. She'd spent 2 years drowning in grief and rage, dropping out of school, working dead-end jobs, until she'd met Uncle Vittorio at her father's grave one rainy afternoon. Your father was murdered by Lorenzo Greco. Vittorio had told her, rainwater mixing with her tears. The Greco family used him, then threw him away like trash when they thought he was a liability. I can give you the truth, Sophia, and I can give you revenge. Vittorio had trained her. Combat, seduction, infiltration. He'd given her a new identity, new papers, and most importantly, a purpose. She'd spent 3 years becoming someone who could get close to Lorenzo Greco, someone who could make him pay. And last night, phase 1 had worked perfectly. Her phone buzzed, a text from Vittorio. He took the bait. Next phase begins tomorrow. You'll receive instructions. Don't fail me, niece. Sophia stared at the message, something cold settling in her stomach. This was what she wanted. Justice. Revenge. Her father's ghost could finally rest. So why did Lorenzo's eyes keep haunting her? Why did she remember the way he'd looked at her? Not with the predatory hunger she'd expected, but with genuine curiosity, as if she were a puzzle he wanted to solve rather than a conquest to claim. She crushed the thought like she'd crushed every soft emotion for 5 years. Lorenzo Greco was a monster. Monsters didn't deserve mercy. 24 hours later, Sophia received her assignment. Lorenzo owned a private art gallery downtown, money laundering through million-dollar paintings. She was to pose as an art consultant, get hired, get close. The interview was scheduled for 3 p.m. She arrived at 2:45, dressed in a cream blouse and tailored pants that suggested professionalism while hinting at the curves beneath. The gallery was elegant. Marble floors, soaring ceilings, art that cost more than most people earned in a lifetime. And there, standing before a Caravaggio painting of Judith beheading Holofernes, was Lorenzo. He didn't turn around when she entered, but his voice carried across the empty space. Judith slaying the general who tried to conquer her city. Interesting choice for a first impression, don't you think? Sophia's heels clicked against marble as she approached. I didn't choose it. You were already here. But you came anyway. Now he turned, and the impact hit her again. That dangerous beauty, those eyes that seemed to see through carefully constructed lies. He was wearing black today, making him look like an avenging angel painted by troubled masters. Sophia Ricci, architecture dropout turned art consultant. Impressive resume for someone who supposedly has no connections in this city. So he'd researched her. Good. Let him dig. Her false background was flawless. I have an eye for beauty and authenticity, she said, meeting his gaze without flinching. Your gallery deals in both, supposedly. Supposedly. A dangerous smile. You doubt my taste? I doubt everything until proven otherwise. They circled each other like wolves, the Caravaggio watching their dance with painted eyes. Lorenzo moved closer, close enough that she could smell his cologne, something expensive and dark, like smoke and buried secrets. Why do you want to work for me, Sophia? Because I want to destroy you. Because you murdered my father. Because every breath you take is an insult to his memory. Because I'm good at what I do, she said instead, and because working for the devil has better benefits than serving heaven. Something flashed in his eyes, amusement, respect, suspicion all tangled together. You called me the devil. You haven't corrected me. The silence stretched between them, loaded with tension that had nothing to do with job interviews and everything to do with the photograph he'd found, the father she'd lost, and the war neither of them had officially declared yet. You're hired, Lorenzo said finally. Start Monday. Salary is generous. Betray me, and they'll never find your body. Clear? Crystal. He stepped even closer, and Sophia's heart hammered against her ribs, not from fear, but from the electric charge when predators recognized each other. His hand reached up, and for one insane moment she thought he might touch her face. Instead, he pulled something from his jacket pocket. The photograph. Her father's face stared up at them both. You dropped this, Lorenzo said softly, dangerously. At my club. I'm returning it because I'm a gentleman. Sophia's fingers closed around it, their hands touching briefly. His skin was warm, human. It should have been cold, reptilian, monstrous. Thank you, she managed. He looks familiar, Lorenzo continued, watching her with the focus of a sniper. Your father? Here it was, the moment of truth she'd been preparing for. Yes. He died 5 years ago, murdered. She let the word hang like a noose. The men who killed him never paid for it. I'm sorry for your loss. His voice was genuine, which made everything worse. Chicago can be a cruel city, dangerous for good people. And what about bad people? Sophia asked, her gray eyes boring into his black ones. What does Chicago do to them? Lorenzo smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Eventually, Sophia Ricci, this city destroys us all. It's just a question of who destroys whom first. He turned and walked away, his footsteps echoing through the gallery like a countdown to something inevitable. Sophia stood there clutching the photograph, her heart racing, her mind screaming warnings her body refused to hear. This was going to be so much harder than she'd thought, because somewhere between the hatred and the mission, she'd felt something when he touched her hand. Something that felt terrifyingly like attraction to the man who'd made her an orphan. And that was the most dangerous thing of all. The gallery became Sophia's gilded cage. For 2 weeks, she cataloged paintings worth millions, authenticated signatures of dead masters, and smiled at wealthy collectors who saw art as investment rather than soul. And every single day, Lorenzo watched her with eyes that missed nothing. He never mentioned her father again, never acknowledged the photograph, but the awareness hung between them like smoke, visible, suffocating, impossible to ignore. The Monet arrives Thursday, Lorenzo said. appearing behind her as she examined a Rothko that looked like bleeding sadness on canvas. His presence always announced itself through the shift in air pressure, the way prey animals sense predators. "I need you to verify authenticity before the auction." Sophia turned, maintaining the professional distance that was becoming harder each day. He wore charcoal gray today, shirt unbuttoned just enough to suggest casualness that didn't exist in any part of Lorenzo Greco's calculated world. "The Monet from the Paris collection? That's a $14 million piece. 16 if it's genuine." He moved closer, studying not the painting, but her. "I trust your eye, Sophia. You see things others miss." The double meaning wasn't subtle. She met his gaze, refusing to be the first to look away. "And if it's a forgery, then someone loses more than money." His smile held winter. "I hate being deceived." The irony wasn't lost on her. She was the biggest deception in his life right now, standing 3 feet away, planning his destruction while her traitorous body responded to his proximity like flame to gasoline. "I'll need access to your private records," she said, keeping her voice steady. "Authentication requires provenance documentation, purchase history, previous appraisals." Lorenzo's eyes narrowed slightly, the predator recognizing a move on the chessboard. "My private records are private for reasons that should be obvious." "Then find another art consultant." Sophia turned back to the Rothko, dismissing him. "I don't authenticate blind." The silence stretched. She could feel his presence like heat against her back. Could imagine him weighing options, calculating risk versus reward. "Fine," he said finally. "But you work from my office, under my supervision. Those records never leave my sight." She'd counted on that. Vittorio needed information, bank transactions, shipping manifests, anything that could expose Lorenzo's operations. Working in his office was exactly where she needed to be. "When do we start?" she asked. "Now." Lorenzo's private office occupied the top floor of the gallery building, and it was nothing like Sophia expected. She'd imagined cold luxury, steel and glass monuments to ego. Instead, she found warmth, mahogany bookshelves lined with first editions, a Steinway piano in the corner covered with handwritten sheet music, walls painted deep burgundy that felt like being inside a beating heart. "You play?" she asked, drawn to the piano despite herself. "I used to." Lorenzo moved to his desk, unlocking drawers with keys that never left his person. "Before I learned that beautiful things break easily in my world." There was something in his voice. Not quite regret, not quite longing. Something human that he shouldn't possess, that made him harder to hate. Sophia forced herself to focus, sitting across from him as he spread documents between them. Purchase orders, shipping receipts, certificates of authenticity going back decades. But her trained eye caught other things, coded notations in margins, numbers that didn't align with listed prices, patterns that suggested money moving through art like water through cupped hands. "This Degas," she said, pointing to a receipt from 2019. "Listed at 400,000, but the notation here suggests actual payment of 2.3 million. Lorenzo didn't even glance at it. "You're observant." "I'm thorough. There's a difference." "Is there?" He leaned back, studying her with that unnerving intensity. "Or are you looking for something specific, Sophia Ricci?" Her heart stuttered, but she kept her expression neutral. "Just doing the job you hired me for." "The job?" "Right." He stood, moving to the window overlooking Chicago's downtown. "Tell me something. Why did you really come to my club that night? Out of all the places in this city, why mine?" This was it. The confrontation she'd been preparing for. "Maybe I like dangerous places," she said carefully. "Or maybe you were looking for someone dangerous." He turned, and the afternoon light painted him in shades of gold and shadow. "Your father worked for people connected to my organization. It's not a large leap to think you're here for more than art authentication." Sophia stood, refusing to be cornered, sitting down. "My father was murdered 5 years ago. If you know something about that, maybe you should tell me instead of playing games." The words hung between them like drawn weapons. Lorenzo crossed the room in 3 strides, and suddenly he was right there, close enough that she could see gold flecks in his dark eyes. could count each deliberately unshaven stubble on his jawline. I know a lot of things, Sophia. His voice dropped to something almost intimate. I know you're not who you pretend to be. I know you're playing a game that could get you killed. And I know... He reached up, his fingers stopping just short of touching her face. That you feel this too. This thing between us that shouldn't exist. Her breath caught. She should step back, should slap him, should do anything except stand there drowning in the truth of his words. I feel nothing, she lied. Liar. But he smiled, and it transformed his face into something almost beautiful. You're a good liar, though. Almost as good as me. The moment shattered when his phone rang. Lorenzo answered, his expression shifting to stone as he listened. When? Where? His jaw tightened. Secure the perimeter. I'm coming now. He hung up, already moving toward the door. Come with me. What? Why? Because you wanted access to my world, Sophia. Now you're going to see exactly what that means. 20 minutes later, Sophia found herself in a warehouse on the south side that smelled of rust and fear. Lorenzo's men surrounded a kneeling figure, a young man, maybe 25, bleeding from a split lip and terror written across his features. This is Marcus Chen, Lorenzo said, his voice devoid of the warmth from his office. This was the other Lorenzo, the one who executed traitors in darkness. He's been stealing from me, 30,000 over 6 months, thinking I wouldn't notice. Mr. Greco, please, Marcus's voice cracked. I have a daughter. She's sick. The medical bills. And my sympathy changes the theft how? Lorenzo pulled out his gun with the casual ease of someone reaching for car keys. You knew the rules when you started working for me. Sophia's stomach turned. This was why she was here. To witness this monster. To remember what he'd done to her father. To feel nothing but hatred. But then Lorenzo's eyes found hers across the warehouse, and she saw something unexpected. A question. A test, maybe. Or perhaps something more complicated. How much does your daughter need? Sophia heard herself ask. Everyone turned to her. Marcus's eyes widened with desperate hope. Lorenzo's expression remained unreadable. Miss? Marcus stammered. For her treatment. How much? 40,000. But I only took 30. I swear I was going to pay it back. You were going to pay back stolen money with what? More stolen money? Lorenzo's voice cut like razors. That's not how this works. Sophia stepped forward, some reckless part of her taking control. Then let me make an alternative proposal. He works off the debt. Legitimate work, supervised, with his salary garnished until you're repaid with interest. His daughter gets treatment. You get your money back. Everyone lives. The silence was deafening. Lorenzo stared at her like she'd grown a second head. You're suggesting I show mercy to a thief. I'm suggesting that killing him solves nothing and costs you a worker. Dead men can't repay debts. Dead men can't steal again either. True. Sophia moved closer to Lorenzo, lowering her voice so only he could hear. But living men can become loyal. Fear creates followers. Mercy creates believers. Your choice which legacy you want. Something flickered across Lorenzo's face. Surprise. Consideration. Something that looked dangerously like respect. He turned back to Marcus, gun still drawn. The warehouse held its collective breath. You have 6 months to repay 45,000. Lorenzo said finally. You'll work in my legitimate businesses, every movement monitored. If you steal again, if you run, if you breathe wrong, I won't be this generous. And you'll thank Sophia Ricci every single day because she just saved your miserable life. Marcus collapsed in sobs of relief. Lorenzo's men looked confused, exchanging glances that questioned everything they thought they knew about their boss. Lorenzo holstered his weapon and walked out without another word. Sophia found him outside, leaning against his car, staring at the setting sun, painting Chicago in blood colors. That was stupid, he said when she approached. Showing mercy makes me look weak. That was human, she corrected. There's a difference. He laughed, but it sounded hollow. I'm not human, Sophia. I stopped being human the first time I killed someone. I was 12. The confession landed like a blow. Sophia's carefully constructed hate wavered. My father, Lorenzo continued, staring at nothing. He was a drunk who beat my mother and sold me to Don Castellano to settle a debt. Castellano made me kill a man who'd stolen from him, put a gun in my 12-year-old hands and said, "Prove you're worth keeping alive." So I did, and I've been proving it ever since. Sophia didn't know what to say. This wasn't the monster she'd imagined. This was something infinitely more complicated, a victim who'd become a villain, a child forced into darkness who never found the light. "Why are you telling me this?" she whispered. Lorenzo finally looked at her, and his eyes held exhaustion that went bone deep. "Because you looked at me in that warehouse like I could be something other than a monster. And for one stupid moment, I wanted to believe you." He opened the car door. "I'm taking you home. And Sophia, whatever game you're playing, whatever reason you're really here, be careful, because I'm starting to care whether you survive it, and that makes you the most dangerous person in my life." The drive back was silent, charged with confessions neither could take back. When they reached her apartment, Lorenzo spoke one last time. "Your father, Marco Ricci. I need you to know something." Sophia's blood turned to ice. "The order to kill him came from Don Castellano. He told me Marco was an FBI informant, that he was betraying families. I followed orders because that's what soldiers do." His knuckles were white on the steering wheel. "But I've recently learned the evidence might have been fabricated, that your father might have been innocent." The world tilted. Sophia gripped the door handle to keep from falling into the void opening beneath her. "If that's true," Lorenzo continued, his voice rough, "then I killed an innocent man. And no amount of mercy in warehouses will ever make that right." He drove away before she could respond, leaving her standing on the sidewalk with her entire mission crumbling around her. Because if Lorenzo was telling the truth, if Castellano had fabricated everything, then who had really killed her father? And why had Uncle Vittorio never mentioned that possibility? Sophia didn't sleep for 3 days. She tore through every document Vittorio had given her, searching for mentions of Castellano, looking for inconsistencies in the story she'd built her entire revenge around. The coffee went cold on her desk as dawn bled into her cramped apartment, painting everything in shades of doubt. Her phone buzzed. "Vittorio. Progress report, now." They met in Grant Park, where the autumn wind off Lake Michigan cut through her jacket like accusation. Vittorio sat on a bench feeding pigeons, playing the harmless old man. But Sophia knew better. She'd seen him break a man's fingers for being 2 minutes late. "You're getting close to him," Vittorio said without looking at her. "Good. Has he shared any shipping schedules? Bank account access codes?" "He told me about my father," Sophia said instead. "About Castellano ordering the hit. About fabricated evidence." Vittorio's hand stilled over the birdseed. "And you believed him? Is it true? Sophia, is it true that the evidence might have been manufactured?" Her voice rose enough to scatter the pigeons. "That my father might have been innocent? That Lorenzo was just following orders based on lies?" Vittorio stood, his avuncular mask slipping to reveal something colder underneath. "Does it matter? Greco pulled the trigger. Your father is still dead. The man responsible is still breathing. It matters if we're aiming at the wrong target." The slap came so fast Sophia barely registered it before her cheek exploded in pain. She stumbled back, hand flying to her face, staring at her uncle with shock that tasted like blood. "You're falling for him," Vittorio hissed, grabbing her arm hard enough to bruise. "I warned you this might happen. He's good at making people believe he's human. That's how predators work, Sophia. They make you trust them before they devour you. Let go of me. Not until you remember why you're there." His fingers dug deeper. "Lorenzo Greco murdered your father in cold blood. He's murdered dozens. He's a cancer in this city, and you're the knife that's going to cut him out. Don't forget that." Sophia wrenched free, stepping back. "I haven't forgotten anything. But I'm not going to be your weapon if you're lying to me." "Then you're useless to me." Vittorio's voice went flat, and that was somehow more terrifying than his anger. "And useless things don't survive long in our world. Complete the mission, Sophia, or I'll find someone who will." He walked away, leaving her standing among scattered birdseed and shattered certainty. Sophia went to work that afternoon with makeup covering the bruise and questions she couldn't voice burning holes in her composure. The gallery was unusually quiet, no collectors, no staff, just classical music drifting from Lorenzo's office upstairs. She found him at the piano, actually playing it this time. Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major, the notes falling like rain against windows, melancholic and beautiful and completely at odds with the man who murdered for a living. He stopped when he sensed her presence, hands stilling over keys. "I didn't think you'd come back." "Why wouldn't I?" "Because I told you I killed your father." Lorenzo turned on the bench and his eyes found the makeup on her cheek with laser precision. "What happened to your face?" "Nothing. I walked into a cabinet." He was on his feet in seconds, crossing the space between them before she could retreat. His fingers caught her chin gently, tilting her face into better light. The touch was nothing like Vittorio's violence, careful, almost reverent. "That's not a cabinet bruise," Lorenzo said softly, dangerously. "That's a handprint. Someone hit you." Sophia pulled away, but the damage was done. He'd seen. He knew. Who? One word, carrying the weight of execution orders. "It doesn't matter." "It matters to me." His voice dropped to something that made her spine straighten with instinctive warning. "Give me a name, Sophia." This was spiraling wrong. She needed to redirect, to regain control. "Why do you care? I'm just your employee, your convenient art consultant who you suspect is playing games. You stopped being just anything the moment you walked into my club." Lorenzo moved back to the piano, but his posture remained coiled, predatory. "I've been thinking about what you said in the warehouse, about mercy creating believers, about choosing legacy. And I looked into your father's case, really looked beyond the file Castellano gave me." His hands moved over the piano keys without pressing down, tracing melodies only he could hear. "There was no FBI contact. Agent Morrison testified under oath 3 years ago that he'd never heard of Marco Ricci. The bank records showing payoffs? Fabricated. The wiretaps? Never existed." Sophia's legs felt suddenly weak. She sank into the leather chair by his desk, her entire world restructuring itself around this confirmation. Castellano lied. Lorenzo continued, finally pressing keys that released haunting notes into the air. "He manufactured evidence to make me kill an innocent man. The question is why? Why are you telling me this?" Sophia's voice cracked. "If you know who I am, if you know I'm here for revenge, because you deserve the truth, and because—" He stopped playing, turning to face her fully. "Because I'm tired of living in a world built on lies. My whole life has been following orders without questioning, trusting men who saw me as a weapon instead of a human being. I'm done with that." The vulnerability in his admission hit her harder than Vittorio's slap. This was Lorenzo Greco without armor, offering honesty like an olive branch across a battlefield. "My uncle is the one who sent me," Sophia heard herself confess. "Vittorio Ricci. He told me you killed my father in cold blood, that you were a monster who needed to be stopped. He trained me for 3 years to get close to you, to gather evidence, to kill me?" Lorenzo finished calmly. "I assumed as much." "You knew?" "I suspected. The photograph was too convenient, your appearance too perfectly timed. But—" He stood, moving toward her with the measured steps of someone approaching a wounded animal. "I kept you close anyway, because I wanted to understand why you fascinated me, why you made me question everything I've built." He crouched before her chair, eye level now, close enough that she could see the exhaustion etched into his features. "Ask me, Sophia. Ask me what you really want to know." "Did you know?" Her eyes burned with tears she refused to shed. "When you pulled that trigger, did you know my father was innocent?" "No." One word, absolute and unwavering. "I swear on everything I am I believed Castellano. I thought I was protecting families from a traitor. I was 29, hungry to prove myself, desperate for approval from the only father figure I'd ever known. I didn't question. I should have, but I didn't." A tear escaped despite her best efforts. Lorenzo caught it with his thumb, the gesture so tender it shattered something in her chest. "I can't take back what I did," he whispered. "I can't bring him back. But I can give you the man who's really responsible. Castellano manipulated both of us, killed your father, destroyed your life, and turned me into his weapon. Help me bring him down, Sophia. Help me make this right." It was insane. Impossible. The enemy of her enemy offering alliance when she should be plunging a knife into his heart. But looking into his eyes, she saw the same pain that had been eating her alive for 5 years. Different source, same wound. "My uncle," she said slowly. "Vittorio. He never mentioned Castellano fabricating evidence. He never suggested looking deeper. He just pointed me at you and said revenge." Lorenzo's expression darkened. "Vittorio Ricci. I know that name. He worked for Castellano in the old days, before your father opened the restaurant. They had a falling out years ago over territory disputes. The pieces started falling into horrible place. He used me. He used my grief to turn me into exactly what I was, a weapon." Lorenzo stood, pulling her up with him. "We're both victims of men who see people as tools, but we don't have to stay weapons, Sophia. We can choose something different." Before she could respond, before logic could override instinct, Lorenzo's phone erupted with urgent buzzing. He answered, his body going rigid as he listened. "How many?" A pause. "Secure all exits. I'm coming down." He hung up, already moving toward a hidden panel in the wall that revealed an arsenal. "We have a situation. Someone's breaching the gallery. Multiple attackers." "What? Who?" "I don't know yet, but if you're with me, grab a gun and stay close." "If you're not—" He tossed her a Glock, which she caught automatically, Vittorio's training taking over. "Now's your chance to run, Sophia. Choose." The sound of shattering glass came from downstairs. Shouting, gunfire. Sophia checked the magazine, chambered around, and moved beside Lorenzo. "If we're doing this, we're doing it together." Something blazed in his eyes. Surprise, gratitude, something that looked dangerously like the beginning of trust. They descended the stairs into chaos. 5 men in tactical gear, faces covered, spreading through the gallery with military precision. Not robbery. This was assassination. Lorenzo took down the first with 2 shots, clean and efficient. Sophia dropped behind a marble pillar as bullets shattered priceless art around them. The second attacker swung toward her and she fired on instinct, hitting center mass. He went down. The remaining 3 regrouped, and that's when Sophia saw the tattoo on one attacker's exposed wrist. A serpent eating its tail. Vittorio's family symbol. "Lorenzo!" She screamed the warning as the largest attacker charged from his blind side. He turned too late. The knife caught him across the ribs, drawing blood that looked black in the gallery lighting. Lorenzo staggered but fired point blank, dropping his attacker. But the damage was done. Crimson spread across his white shirt like an accusation. Sophia moved without thinking, firing twice more to cover them as Lorenzo stumbled toward the back exit. They made it to his car, tires screaming as they peeled away from the gallery with bullets chasing them into Chicago traffic. "How bad?" Sophia pressed her jacket against his wound, blood hot and wet against her hands. "Bad enough." Lorenzo's face had gone pale, but his driving remained steady. "Your uncle's message was clear. He's done with subtlety. He knows I talked to you. He knows I'm questioning." Her hands shook against his bleeding side. "He's tying up loose ends. And we're both loose ends now." Lorenzo took a corner hard, and the movement made him grunt in pain. "My safe house. 20 minutes. We get there, I can patch this up, and we figure out our next move." But the blood kept coming, soaking through her jacket, through her fingers, hot and terrifying. Lorenzo's skin was cooling under her touch, his breathing getting shallow. "Stay with me," she commanded, her voice breaking. "You don't get to die before I decide whether to forgive you." He laughed, which turned into a cough that spattered blood on the steering wheel. "Is that a maybe on forgiveness?" "It's a definitely if you stay alive, you idiot." They made it to the safe house, a nondescript brownstone in a quiet neighborhood where no one asked questions. Sophia helped Lorenzo inside, and he collapsed onto a leather couch that had probably seen this scenario before. Medical kit, he gasped, pointing to a cabinet. Whiskey, needle and thread in the sterilized pack. Sophia had seen her share of injuries during Vittorio's training, but nothing prepared her for cutting open Lorenzo's shirt and seeing the knife wound, deep, still bleeding, the kind that needed a hospital and trained doctors. "This needs stitches beyond my skill level," she said, hands hovering uselessly. "Then learn fast." He took a long pull of whiskey, then poured it directly on the wound. His back arched with pain, but he didn't scream. "I can't go to a hospital. Too many questions. Too many people who want me dead would know where to find me." So Sophia did what she'd been trained to do. She shut down emotion, let instinct take over, and she stitched Lorenzo Greco back together with shaking hands while he gripped the couch hard enough to crack leather. When it was done, when he was bandaged and medicated and finally sleeping, Sophia sat on the floor beside the couch and let herself fall apart. She cried for her father, for the lies, for the 5 years wasted on revenge aimed at the wrong target, for the man bleeding on the couch who'd shown her more honesty in 2 weeks than her own uncle had in a lifetime. And underneath all of it, terrifying and undeniable, she cried for the realization that somewhere between the hatred and the truth, she'd started caring whether Lorenzo Greco lived or died, which made her the biggest fool of all. Lorenzo woke to the smell of coffee and the unfamiliar sensation of someone caring whether he lived. Sophia sat in the chair across from him, still wearing yesterday's blood-stained clothes, dark circles under storm-gray eyes that hadn't seen sleep. She looked like a warrior after battle, exhausted, beautiful, dangerous. "You're still here," he said, his voice rough from pain and medication. "Where else would I go? My uncle wants me dead. Your enemies want you dead. We're safest together." She handed him coffee, their fingers brushing. Neither pulled away. "How's the pain?" "I've had worse." A lie, but Lorenzo had been lying about pain since he was 12. "The stitches will hold?" "They'll hold. I'm better at field medicine than I thought." Something haunted crossed her expression. "My uncle trained me well, for all the wrong reasons, but well." The mention of Vittorio shifted the atmosphere. Lorenzo pushed himself up carefully, testing his body's limits. The wound pulled but didn't tear. Sophia had done good work. "We need to talk about what happens next," he said. "I know." Sophia set down her coffee, meeting his eyes with the directness he'd come to expect from her. "Vittorio will come for both of us now. He can't risk me telling you whatever secrets he's kept. And Castellano, if he fabricated evidence to have my father killed, there's a reason. We need to find out why." Lorenzo stood slowly, moving to the window. Dawn painted Chicago in shades of amber and shadow, a city that had taken everything from both of them and given back only scars. "Your father's restaurant," he said slowly, pieces clicking together. "It was in Little Italy, near the old waterfront district. That area has been prime real estate for development for years. If someone wanted to gentrify, they'd need to clear out the old establishments first." Sophia's eyes widened. "The restaurant building. It's been empty since my father died. I couldn't afford to keep it, couldn't bear to sell it. It's just been sitting there." "Who owns the surrounding properties?" "I don't know. After my father's death, I couldn't focus on anything. Vittorio handled the paperwork, said he'd take care of the legal complications." She stopped, realization hitting like physical force. He wanted the building. Lorenzo turned from the window, his strategic mind assembling the puzzle. Vittorio and Castellano have been business partners for decades. If they wanted that whole block for development, your father's refusal to sell would have been a problem. An insurmountable problem unless he was dead and his grieving daughter was too destroyed to care about property. Sophia's voice went hollow. They killed him for real estate, for money. The rage that crossed her face was incandescent, and Lorenzo recognized it intimately. He'd worn that same expression at 12, standing over his father's body after Castellano made him pull the trigger. The moment innocence died and vengeance was born. "We need proof," Lorenzo said, already pulling out his laptop. "Bank records, property deeds, development permits. If Castellano and Vittorio are partners in this, there'll be a paper trail." They worked in tandem, Sofia using credentials Vittorio had given her to access family financial records while Lorenzo hacked into city databases with tools that cost more than most people's houses. Hours blurred together, coffee turned cold, daylight shifted across the room, and gradually the conspiracy revealed itself in spreadsheets and signatures. "Here," Sofia said, her voice tight. 6 months before my father died, Vittorio took out a loan for $12 million. Collateral listed as future property acquisitions in Development Zone 7. Zone 7 is Little Italy. Lorenzo pulled up another file. And look, 3 months after your father's death, Castellanos Holding Company purchased the entire block through shell corporations. Current value, $43 million, with luxury condos breaking ground next spring. The evidence was damning, incontrovertible. They'd murdered Marco Ricci for profit margins and waterfront views. Sofia stood abruptly, pacing like a caged animal. They used his death. Used my grief. Vittorio probably watched me cry at the funeral while calculating his return on investment. And he used me as the weapon, Lorenzo added, his own rage building. Pointed me at an innocent man. Let me carry the guilt, all while he profited from the kill. We're both victims of the same manipulation. Their eyes met across the room, and in that moment, something fundamental shifted. Not quite forgiveness. Too much blood lay between them for that. But understanding. Alliance. Recognition of shared trauma inflicted by men who saw people as pawns. Sofia moved first, crossing the space between them. We destroy them, both of them. We take everything they've built and burn it to the ground. Agreed. Lorenzo caught her hand, thumb brushing across her knuckles. But we do it smart. Calculated. We can't just kill them. We dismantle their empire piece by piece, expose their crimes, make sure they lose everything before they lose their lives. How? I have copies of my entire organization's financial records. Everything Castellano thinks is hidden. We combine that with what you can access through Vittorio's accounts. We have enough evidence to bring down both families. His grip tightened. But Sofia, once we start this, there's no going back. They'll come at us with everything. We'll be marked for death by every soldier in Chicago. She didn't hesitate. Good. Let them come. The steel in her voice sent something hot through Lorenzo's chest. Admiration, desire, something that felt dangerously like pride. This woman who should hate him, who had every right to put a bullet in his head, was instead standing with him against the men who'd destroyed both their lives. There's something you should know, Sofia said quietly. Before we do this. Before we cross the line together. What? She stepped closer and Lorenzo could smell jasmine perfume mixed with coffee and fear and determination. When I stitched you up last night, when I thought you might die, I realized I don't want you dead anymore, Lorenzo. I don't forgive you, not completely, but I understand you. And that's more dangerous than hatred ever was. The confession hung between them like a lit fuse. Lorenzo should step back, should maintain distance, should remember that mixing business with emotion got people killed in his world. Instead, he reached up and cupped her face, his thumb tracing the bruise Vittorio had left. He put his hands on you. That alone is enough reason to destroy him. This isn't about protecting me. Yes, it is. The admission came out rough, honest. Somewhere between you walking into my club and you saving my life. This became personal. Not just revenge. Not just strategy. You became someone He stopped, searching for words he hadn't needed in years. Someone I can't lose. Sofia's breath hitched. Lorenzo. The kiss happened like violence and tenderness colliding. She grabbed his shirt, mindful of his wound, and pulled him down to her level. His hands buried in her hair, angling her head to deepen the kiss that tasted like coffee and desperation, and 5 years of misdirected rage finally finding its true target. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Lorenzo rested his forehead against hers. This is a terrible idea. The worst, Sofia agreed, her fingers still twisted in his shirt. We're supposed to be enemies. We are enemies, just not each other's anymore. The moment shattered when Lorenzo's phone erupted with vibration. He pulled it out, reading the message, and his expression went lethal. "What is it?" Sophia asked. "Castellano. He's calling a meeting tomorrow night at the Bellini estate. All family heads. He's declared me a traitor for the gallery attack, put a price on my head." Lorenzo's jaw clenched. $5 million for whoever brings him my corpse. They're consolidating power, preparing to eliminate you officially. Which means this is our window. If we're going to move against them, it has to be now, before they have time to secure their positions. He started typing rapidly. "I'm calling in every favor I have. Every soldier still loyal to me over Castellano. We have 24 hours to build an army. And I'll get the financial evidence compiled, ready to leak to every news outlet and law enforcement agency simultaneously." Sophia grabbed her phone, her mind clearly racing through strategy. "When we hit them so hard there's nothing left to rebuild." They worked through the day into evening, making calls, transferring files, building a case that would destroy decades of criminal empire. Lorenzo reached out to families who'd grown tired of Castellano's iron grip. Sophia compiled evidence that would put both men in prison for multiple lifetimes. By midnight they had 12 soldiers confirmed, enough evidence to sink a battleship, and a plan that was 50% brilliant, 50% suicidal. "We need to sleep," Lorenzo said, though his body was wired on adrenaline and pain medication. "Tomorrow's going to be hell." "There's only one bed," Sophia observed, looking at the safe house's single bedroom. "I'll take the couch." "You're injured. You need the bed." She paused, something vulnerable crossing her features. "Or we could share. Just sleep. I don't want to be alone tonight." Lorenzo understood that. The exhaustion, the fear, the need for human contact before possible death. "Okay." They lay on opposite sides of the bed at first, careful not to touch, two damaged people trying not to inflict more wounds. But sometime in the dark hours before dawn, Sophia shifted closer, and Lorenzo's arm came around her automatically, pulling her against his uninjured side. "Tell me something true," she whispered into the darkness. "Something you've never told anyone." Lorenzo stared at the ceiling, feeling her heartbeat against his ribs. "When I killed your father, I went home and threw up for 3 hours. I told myself it was the whiskey, but I knew better. Some part of me understood even then that something was wrong, that I'd crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed." Sophia was quiet for a long moment. "My father used to sing Italian opera while cooking Sunday dinner. Terribly, completely off-key. But he was so happy doing it." Her voice cracked. "I haven't been able to listen to opera since he died. It hurts too much." "I'm sorry." The words were inadequate, microscopic against the magnitude of what he'd taken from her. "I know you are." She turned in his arms, her gray eyes finding his in the darkness. "And that's why this is so complicated. Because I want to hate you, Lorenzo. It would be so much easier. But you're not the monster I came here to destroy. You're just another broken thing in a world that breaks everyone eventually." He kissed her forehead, gentle as prayer. "Tomorrow, we break the men who broke us. Together." "Together," she agreed. And finally, they slept. Lorenzo woke before dawn to find Sophia gone. Panic seized him immediately. He checked the bathroom, the kitchen, the entire safe house. Her jacket was missing, her phone gone. Then he saw it, the note on the pillow where her head had been, written in elegant script that made his blood run cold. "Lorenzo, I'm sorry." Vittorio called. "He has insurance I didn't know about, records that would destroy what's left of my father's name, paint him as the criminal Castellano claimed. I can't let my father's memory be destroyed. I have to meet him. Alone. If I'm not back by noon, assume the worst. The evidence against Castellano is on the encrypted drive in the kitchen drawer. Use it. Burn them down, even if I can't be there to watch. S." Lorenzo's hands shook with rage and terror. She'd gone to face Vittorio alone, trading herself for her father's reputation. The woman he was falling for had just walked into a death trap, and he had exactly 6 hours to find her before Vittorio made sure she never walked out. Lorenzo drove through Chicago like a man possessed, his wounds screaming protest with every sharp turn. The pain was nothing compared to the terror clawing at his chest. The image of Sofia facing Vittorio alone, walking into sacrifice like some martyred saint. He'd made 3 calls. First to Marco, his underboss. Track every property Vittorio owns. Church, warehouse, anything. I need locations now. Second to his best hacker. Break into Vittorio's phone records. Find his last location ping. Third to Tony Battaglia. Assemble everyone still loyal. Armed. I'm going to war, and I need soldiers willing to die today. The responses came back within 20 minutes. Vittorio's last known location. An abandoned meat processing plant on the south side. The kind of place where screams got lost in industrial decay and bodies disappeared into furnaces. Lorenzo's hands tightened on the steering wheel until his knuckles went white. The building loomed against the gray morning sky like a tombstone. Lorenzo parked 3 blocks away, checking his weapons with the methodical precision of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. 2 Berettas, spare magazines, a knife strapped to his ankle. His wound throbbed, fresh blood seeping through the bandage, but he pushed the pain into a box in his mind labeled, "Deal with later." Right now, only Sofia mattered. He entered through a side entrance that his contacts confirmed was the least guarded. The plant smelled of rust and old meat and death that had happened here long before today. His footsteps were silent on concrete as he moved through corridors that had witnessed decades of Chicago's ugliest secrets. Voices drifted from the main processing floor, Vittorio's cultured Italian accent and another voice Lorenzo would recognize in hell, Castellano. Both of them here. Both of them with Sofia. Lorenzo positioned himself behind a support column where he could see without being seen. The sight made his blood freeze. Sofia was bound to a metal chair in the center of the vast space, blood trickling from a split lip, defiance still blazing in her storm-gray eyes despite the obvious beating she'd taken. Vittorio circled her like a shark, while Castellano sat on a crate smoking a cigar, watching with the detached interest of someone evaluating livestock. "You were always too emotional, like your father," Vittorio was saying, his voice carrying fatherly disappointment that made Lorenzo's trigger finger itch. Marco couldn't see the bigger picture either. He actually believed that restaurant meant something beyond profit margins. He believed in family. Sofia spat, blood on her teeth. "Something you've never understood." The backhand came fast, snapping her head to the side. Lorenzo's body moved instinctively forward before his brain stopped him. Not yet. He needed to hear more, understand the full scope before he acted. "Family is a fairy tale we tell ourselves to feel less alone," Vittorio said, shaking out his hand. "Your father learned that lesson when I put those bullets in his chest. Oh yes, Sofia. Did you think I'd let Lorenzo Greco have all the fun? I was there. I watched Marco beg for his life, promising he'd sign over the property. But by then, it was too late. Dead men's signatures are easier to forge." The revelation hit Lorenzo like a physical blow. Vittorio had been there. Had possibly even pulled the trigger himself while Lorenzo was just the convenient scapegoat. Sofia's face had gone pale, but her voice remained steady. "You killed your own brother." "Half-brother," Vittorio corrected. "And he was weak, just like you're proving to be. Choosing Lorenzo Greco of all people. The man who helped murder your father. The man you manipulated into doing your dirty work." Sofia shot back. "Lorenzo was a weapon you aimed. The guilt belongs to the one who pulled the trigger. You." Castellano laughed, the sound like grinding stones. "She's got spirit, Vittorio. Almost ashamed to waste it." He stood, moving closer to Sofia. "But business is business. You and Greco know too much. The evidence you've compiled would dismantle everything we've built. Can't have that." "Lorenzo won't stop," Sofia said, and Lorenzo heard something in her voice that made his chest tighten. Faith. She believed he'd come. "He'll burn your entire empire down." "Let him try." Castellano pulled out a gun, checking the chamber with casual expertise. "We've got 50 men surrounding this building. When he comes for you, and the fool will come, we'll be ready. Your bait, sweetheart. Very effective bait." This was the trap. They wanted him here, wanted him emotional and reckless. Every instinct Lorenzo had screamed to wait for backup, to be strategic. But looking at Sofia bleeding in that chair, knowing she'd walked into hell to protect her father's memory, strategy evaporated into something more primal. He stepped out from behind the column, both guns raised. "Then let's not disappoint them," Lorenzo said, his voice carrying across the empty space. 7 things happened simultaneously. Vittorio spun toward him, reaching for his weapon. Castellano's gun swung toward Sofia's head. Lorenzo fired twice, dropping 2 guards he'd sensed behind him without looking. The main doors exploded inward as Marco and 8 of Lorenzo's soldiers stormed in, guns blazing. Sofia threw herself backward in the chair, tipping it to get out of Castellano's line of fire. Glass shattered from the upper windows as Tony's team rappelled in from the roof, and the world became gunfire and chaos. Lorenzo moved through it like he'd been born for this moment. He put 3 rounds into guards charging from the left, dropped and rolled to avoid return fire, came up shooting. Beside him, Marco was a whirlwind of violence, covering his blind spots with the synchronization of soldiers who'd survived 100 battles together. But Lorenzo's focus never wavered from Sofia. He fought his way across the processing floor, every step a small war, until he reached her. One shot severed the ropes binding her wrists. She was up instantly, grabbing a fallen guard's weapon with practiced efficiency that reminded him she'd been trained for this. "You came," she said, breathless, beautiful, alive. "Did you doubt it?" He handed her one of his Berettas. "Stay behind me." "I don't stay behind anyone." She fired past his shoulder, dropping a guard he hadn't seen. "We fight together or not at all." Something fierce and possessive roared through Lorenzo's chest. This woman, this impossible, magnificent woman. They moved as one unit, back to back, covering each other through the firefight that was slowly turning in their favor. Castellano's men were well trained, but Lorenzo's soldiers fought with the desperation of those who knew their boss would die for them, and that made all the difference. The shooting stopped as suddenly as it started, leaving only smoke and ringing ears and bodies scattered like discarded puppets. Vittorio and Castellano had retreated to a corner office barricaded behind steel doors. Lorenzo could hear them shouting, arguing about escape routes and betrayals, and who was to blame for the plan falling apart. "It's over," Lorenzo called out, his voice carrying deadly promise. "Come out or we come in. Either way, you die today." "You think you've won?" Castellano's voice echoed back, thick with rage. "You're a dead man, Greco. Every family in Chicago will hunt you for this." "Let them try." Lorenzo glanced at Sofia, seeing his own determination reflected in her eyes. "We have enough evidence to put you away for 10 lifetimes. Financial records, witness testimonies, everything. You're done." Silence. Then, "What do you want?" "The truth," Sofia said, stepping forward. "On record. About my father. About Marco Ricci. You tell the world what you did, or we execute you right here, and let the evidence speak for itself." More silence. Whispered argument behind the steel. The door opened slowly. Vittorio emerged first, hands raised, face a mask of defeat that Lorenzo didn't trust for a second. Castellano followed, still holding his gun but pointed at the ground. "Marco Ricci was innocent," Castellano said flatly, the words clearly bitter. "We fabricated evidence to have him killed because he refused to sell his property. The entire block was worth $43 million in development potential. He was an obstacle. We removed him. And you used me," Lorenzo added, his gun never wavering. "Made me your weapon, made me your executioner." "You were always a weapon," Castellano said, and something in his eyes shifted, calculation to resignation to desperate rage. "From the moment I found you, 12 years old and shaking over your father's body, I made you into the perfect soldier. You should be thanking me. The confession should have brought satisfaction." Instead, Lorenzo felt only hollowness where revenge used to burn. "You didn't make me anything," he said quietly. "You just broke something that was already cracking. But I'm done being broken by you." He lowered his gun. "Marco, call the feds. We're handing them over with full evidence. I want them to rot in prison, not get the mercy of a bullet." That's when Castellano moved. The old man was faster than his age suggested, gun swinging up toward Lorenzo with deadly intent. But Sofia was faster. She fired once, the shot precise, and Castellano's gun clattered to the ground as he grabbed his shoulder, howling. Vittorio saw his opportunity in the distraction. He lunged for Sofia, a knife appearing in his hand from somewhere, madness in his eyes. "You ungrateful bitch. After everything I did for you." Lorenzo's world narrowed to that knife arcing toward Sofia's throat. He threw himself forward, catching Vittorio's wrist, twisting. Bone cracked. The knife fell. But Vittorio was desperate now, all calculated composure gone, fighting with the strength of someone who had nothing left to lose. They grappled across the floor, two men who'd caused so much pain trying to destroy each other. Vittorio's elbow caught Lorenzo's wound, and white-hot agony exploded through his side. His grip loosened for just a second. Vittorio's hand found a gun, raised it toward Lorenzo's head. Time slowed. The shot echoed like thunder. But it wasn't Lorenzo who fell. Vittorio staggered backward, a red bloom spreading across his chest, shock written on his face. He looked down at the wound, then up at Sofia, who stood with smoking gun and tears streaming down her face. "That's for my father," she whispered, "and for every lie you told me." Vittorio collapsed, blood pooling beneath him, his last expression a mixture of surprise and something that might have been regret. Lorenzo pulled himself to his feet, ignoring his screaming wound, and went to Sofia. She was shaking, the gun loose in her hand, staring at her uncle's body. "It's done," Lorenzo said gently, taking the weapon from her. "It's over." "Is it?" She looked up at him, and her eyes held devastation. "I killed him, Lorenzo. My own blood. I'm just like you now." "No." He pulled her close, mindful of her injuries and his. "You're nothing like what I was. I killed for orders, for approval, for a system that used me. You killed for justice, for your father. There's a difference." Police sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. The feds that Marco had called, arriving to clean up the mess decades in the making. "We need to go," Marco said, appearing beside them. "Now, before this gets complicated." But Lorenzo didn't move. He cupped Sofia's face, forcing her to look at him. "I need you to know something before the world caves in case we don't, in case this ends badly. Lorenzo, I'm falling in love with you," he said, the words raw and honest and terrifying. "I don't know when it happened. Probably the moment you looked at me like I was worth saving. But I need you to know, whatever happens next, you changed me. You made me want to be something more than a weapon." Sofia's tears fell harder, but she smiled through them. "You idiot. We're wanted by the police, hunted by criminal families, and you choose now to confess feelings? Terrible timing is kind of my specialty." She kissed him then, hard and desperate and tasting like blood and salt and new beginnings. When they broke apart, sirens were right outside. "There's something you don't know," Sofia said quickly, her hand pressed against his chest. "Something I found out 3 days ago. I was going to tell you after this was over." "Tell me now." "I'm pregnant, Lorenzo." The words came out barely a whisper. 2 months. I wasn't sure how, but then I remembered that night after the warehouse when we both needed comfort when... The world tilted. Lorenzo stared at her, his mind unable to process this revelation on top of everything else. We're... Words failed him. "We're having a baby." Sofia's hand covered her still flat stomach. "I know this is the worst possible timing. I know we're in the middle of a war, but you needed to know before..." The doors burst open. Federal agents poured in, weapons drawn, shouting orders that sounded like white noise compared to the truth ringing in Lorenzo's ears. He was going to be a father. This woman who'd walked into his life planning to kill him was carrying his child. Everything he thought he knew about his future shattered and reformed around this single, impossible fact. "Nobody move," an agent shouted. "Lorenzo Greco, Sofia Ricci, you're both under arrest." Lorenzo looked at Sofia, beautiful, deadly, pregnant Sofia, and made a decision that would either save them or damn them forever. "We surrender," he said, hands up. "But we have a deal to offer. Full testimony against the Castellano organization. Every name, every crime, every secret, in exchange for witness protection, for both of us, and immunity. The lead agent, a woman with steel gray hair and eyes that had seen too much, studied them carefully. That's a hell of an offer. What makes you think we'd take it? Because, Sophia stepped forward, her voice steady despite everything. We can give you the biggest criminal network in Chicago history, 30 years of evidence, and we're the only ones who can testify to all of it and live. The agent's eyes narrowed. Then she lowered her weapon. Let's talk. As they were led out into the cold Chicago morning, Lorenzo's hand found Sophia's. Their fingers intertwined, and he felt her pulse, racing but strong, alive, real. They'd survived the abyss, but the real challenge was just beginning. The FBI safe house smelled of stale coffee and desperation. Agent Rebecca Walsh spread files across the table. Full testimony against Castellanos' organization. In exchange, witness protection, new identities, relocation. But first, you wear wires, draw out his network, get confessions. Lorenzo exchanged looks with Sophia, her hand unconsciously on her stomach. We do this, and you guarantee protection for our child. Medical care, everything. Walsh's expression softened. You're pregnant? 2 months, Sophia said defiantly. This baby gets a future without organized crime. Non-negotiable. Agreed. They were fitted with nearly invisible wires. Walsh briefed them quickly. Castellano made bail. He'll contact you trying to assess damage. When he does sound conflicted, make him believe you're considering coming back. Lorenzo's phone rang at 4:47 p.m. Castellanos' voice was smooth, fatherly. Lorenzo. We need to talk. Clear up misunderstandings. You mean fabricating evidence to make me murder an innocent man? You're thinking emotionally. That girl poisoned your mind. Castellanos' tone shifted. The families won't forgive this. You're marked for death. But I can fix it. Come back, denounce her, and we make it disappear. And Sophia? A loose end that needs tying up. FBI agents recorded every word. I'm not coming back, Lorenzo said, and you're not touching her. Then you're dead. Venom replaced the fatherly tone. I made you, Lorenzo. Everything you are, you owe to me. No, you weaponized a traumatized 12-year-old and called it mentorship. I'm done being your creation. Silence. Then, meet me. Tonight. Bellini Estate, midnight. We settle this man to man. I'll be there. Walsh moved immediately. That's suicide. That's the endgame. Lorenzo met Sophia's terrified eyes. He confesses, you record it, and it's over. You're not sacrificing yourself, Sophia said, fury and fear colliding. Our child deserves a father. There's another option, Walsh interjected. We wire the estate. Snipers on buildings. SWAT ready. Lorenzo goes in, but we're everywhere. Lorenzo looked at Sophia, the woman he loved, carrying their child, the reason he wanted to survive. Okay. But Sophia stays in protective custody. Non-negotiable. She buried her face in his chest. I hate this. You're protecting what matters most. He kissed her desperately. I will come back. I swear. You better. Because if you die, I'll bring you back, just to kill you myself. Midnight. The Bellini estate loomed like a monument to violence. Lorenzo climbed familiar stairs, wire recording everything. Snipers watching from darkness. Castellano waited in his study, silhouetted against Chicago's lights. You came alone, as requested. Castellano turned, and Lorenzo saw genuine hurt in ancient eyes. Do you remember the first time I brought you here? You were 12. Your father's blood on your hands. I remember. I asked what you wanted. You said, I want to never feel powerless again. I promised I'd make that happen. By turning me into a monster. By making you a king. Castellano's composure cracked. You could have ruled this city. Instead you threw it away for what? A woman? Love? Yes, I chose something real over your blood-soaked crown. You taught me power matters more than people, but Sophia taught me different. That the strongest thing is choosing to be better than what you made me. Castellano's expression transformed to rage. She made you weak. She made me human. Then you've lost. His hand moved toward the desk drawer. Because humans die, Lorenzo. Legends live forever. FBI, step away from the desk! Chaos exploded. Agents flooded in, windows shattered. But Castellano was faster, grabbing his .45, aiming not at agents, but at Lorenzo. If I can't have you as my legacy, no one will. The gun fired. Lorenzo threw himself sideways, fire tearing across his shoulder. Agents swarmed Castellano as Lorenzo hit the ground, blood hot against his skin. His last conscious thought was Sophia's face. He woke to morning light and Sophia asleep beside his hospital bed, her hand clutching his. His movement woke her. Relief flooded her features. You absolute idiot. You got shot. Again. Did it work? Recorded confession, attempted murder, everything. Her smile was fierce. Multiple life sentences. It's over, Lorenzo. We won. Weight lifted from his chest. And the baby? Perfectly healthy. We're okay. All three of us. Agent Walsh appeared. Touching reunion. But Castellano's loyalists want revenge. We move you into witness protection within 48 hours. New identities, new location, new life. Once you enter, Lorenzo Greco and Sofia Ricci cease to exist. Lorenzo found only determination in Sophia's face. When do we leave? 2 days, maybe 3. After Walsh left, they sat in silence, absorbing the magnitude. Are you scared? Sophia asked. Terrified. I don't know how to be anyone else. Then we'll learn together. She kissed him. New names, new city, just us and our baby, building something beautiful from wreckage. I love you, Sophia. You saved me. I love you too. We're quite a pair of disasters. The best kind. They stayed like that, two broken people learning to be whole, preparing to disappear into ordinary life. But in the shadows beyond, one final threat waited. Antonio appeared in Lorenzo's hospital room on the second night. Castellano's former head of security came alone, hands visible, but danger radiated from him like heat. I'm not here to kill you, Antonio said before Lorenzo could react. The old families want you dead. Witness protection won't save you. They have reach everywhere. He leaned closer. But I'm giving you a choice. Leave the country tonight. Disappear completely. Not into FBI custody, but really disappear. Take the girl. Go somewhere they'll never find you. Lorenzo studied him. Why? I have a daughter, 7 years old. If someone gave me a chance to save her from this life, I'd take it. Antonio stood. 10 minutes. Then I was never here. Sophia appeared after he left. He's right. The FBI can't protect us forever. Then we run, Lorenzo agreed, pulling her close. Really run. 48 hours later, they sat in a private plane headed to Costa Rica, new passports reading Michael and Elena Brooks, a simple American couple seeking a fresh start. I'm leaving everything, Sophia whispered as Chicago disappeared below. My father's grave, every memory. Lorenzo took her hand. We're choosing who we become now. No more Castellano, no more Vittorio, just us. I've been thinking about names for the baby, Sophia said. If it's a girl, Lucia, it means light, and if it's a boy, Marco, after my father. Lorenzo's throat tightened. Perfect, both perfect. Costa Rica's coastal town of Puerto Viejo welcomed them with ocean breezes and second chances. Their small house had white walls, tropical gardens, and a view of the Caribbean that stretched to forever. Lorenzo took a job at the marina. Sophia started designing homes for expats. They built routines, watched sunsets, and slowly became ordinary people with extraordinary secrets. Do you miss it? Sophia asked one evening, 3 months in. The power? I never really lived until now, Lorenzo said, his hand on her growing belly. I survived. There's a difference. Lucia Rose Brooks was born on a humid August morning, screaming her arrival into a world that would never know who her parents had been. Lorenzo held his daughter and understood, finally completely, what it meant to have something worth more than power. She was tiny, perfect, with gray eyes and dark hair, a miracle born from violence and desperate love. We made something pure, Sophia whispered. Lorenzo couldn't speak. This child would never know the man he'd been, would never see violence as normal, would grow up with parents who chose love over everything. I promise to be worthy of you, he whispered to Lucia. Every single day. 18 months passed like healing. Lucia took her first steps on the beach. The marina promoted Lorenzo to manager. Sophia's design business thrived. They became Michael and Elena Brooks completely, the friendly American couple with the beautiful daughter. Then the past found them one final time. Lorenzo was building sandcastles with Lucia when a voice spoke behind him. Michael Brooks. He turned. Agent Rebecca Walsh stood there in casual clothes, sunglasses hiding her eyes. Every muscle tensed. Sophia moved toward Lucia protectively. Relax, Walsh said, hands visible. I'm on vacation. Just happened to run into old acquaintances. She handed Lorenzo a folder. Castellano died 3 months ago. Prison hit. Antonio turned state's evidence after. Every major player is dead or in custody. It's over. Completely over. Lorenzo read through documents confirming her words. Death certificates. Conviction records. Collapsed organizations. Why tell us? Sophia asked. Because you can stop looking over your shoulder now. Walsh's eyes were genuinely kind. What you did took courage. You saved lives. You're raising a beautiful daughter away from that darkness. That's your redemption. After she left, Lorenzo held Sophia close. It's really over. We were always free, Sophia said. From the moment we chose each other. That night after Lucia slept, they sat on their porch watching moonlight paint silver across the ocean. Do you regret it? Sophia asked. Giving up everything? Lorenzo turned her face toward his. Every woman wanted Lorenzo Greco. The power, the danger, the fear. But all that was empty. He kissed her softly. You wanted me dead. And somehow we found something real. Something worth more than any empire. I love you, Michael Brooks. Boat manager. Terrible sandcastle architect. Best father I know. I love you too, Elena. Even though you lie about my sandcastle skills. Inside, Lucia stirred. Together they went to their daughter, this miracle child born from impossible love. She reached up with tiny hands that held no concept of the violence that had led to her existence. Mama, Papa. Lorenzo held her close, Sophia's arms around both of them. He understood now what power had never taught him, that the strongest thing a person could be was vulnerable, present, loved. 5 years later, Lorenzo stood at the marina watching boats come in. Lucia, now 6, sat beside him reading about ocean animals. Papa, octopuses have 3 hearts. That's amazing, he smiled. Sophia appeared with news written across her face. Lucia's going to be a big sister. We're having another baby. Lucia shrieked with joy. Lorenzo pulled Sophia close, kissing her deeply. Another miracle, he whispered. That evening, Lorenzo played piano while Sophia watched from the doorway, her hand on her stomach. The music drifted over Puerto Viejo as the Brooks family, once Greco and Ricci, once enemies, once broken, settled into another ordinary, extraordinary evening. Every woman had wanted Lorenzo Greco, the mafia boss, the killer, the crown. But he'd fallen for the one who wanted him dead. And in dying to who he'd been, he'd finally learned how to live. If you enjoy stories like this, take a moment to subscribe to the channel. That's how I'll know you truly liked it. Even if you're watching on your TV, grab a second to join this family of fans who love emotional and heartfelt stories. Your support means everything, and it helps us bring you even more tales like this one.